Hey, greetings. Welcome to room 1206. My name is David Swanson. I teach at Bacon County High School in Alma, Georgia. And I'm presenting this class as a part of a Liberty University Online Master's in Teaching degree program. I'm going to keep in mind a 20-minute time limit for this assignment. Starting my clock now. Please keep in mind I normally have about 90 minutes to teach this class, so I might put some things on a little bit of fast forward just to get through all of the important pieces. So with that, let's step into my classroom like I'd be teaching this lesson today. Good morning, to which the class repeats, good morning, just as I say it. However I say it, they repeat it back to me. Hey, morning class, good to see you today. Do you remember what I asked you to bring to class today? Some of you were really confused, but I asked you to bring this up. What was it? Sunscreen, that's right. Did you bring your sunscreen? Some of you got a tube of sunscreen. That's awesome. Well, hey, whatever you normally do with sunscreen, take it on thick on your nose, put it on your arms or your shoulders. You're gonna need some sunscreen today because we are going to the beach. Actually, I even got some mood music set for us. Got some mood music going. So I just want you to imagine like you're at the beach right now. Yeah. Austin, what SPF is that? 100? You probably need it. Yeah, what else do you bring to the beach? Some snacks? You got pineapple? I want you to imagine that you're in Hawaii. We're having an excellent beach day in Hawaii when all of a sudden your beach day. Wait a second, what's that? What's that? Beach day, but I hear airplanes. I hear airplanes in the sky. Air raid. The air raid siren. Hey guys, I think we need to take cover. Everybody get on your desk. Get under your desk. Air raid. Air raid. Take cover. All of a sudden, our beach day on the Hawaiian island of Oahu has been interrupted with scenes much like you might see here. Let's take a watch. One admin note, now I'd go on to show a full 8-minute clip from the Hollywood movie Pearl Harbor. It's edited for content and appropriateness. And what I've done is really set the scene for students who are going to be experiencing our conversation about Pearl Harbor today. What I would say at the end of the clip is, and what you just experienced is what it might have been like to wake up in the early morning hours of Sunday, December 7th, 1941, if you were stationed on the Hawaiian island of Oahu, territory of Hawaii, at the naval base located at Pearl Harbor. Today we're going to talk about Pearl Harbor. This is part 2 in our series, Days That Shaped America. Remember previously we talked about April 19th, 1995. In the future, we'll continue our series by talking about September 11th, 2001. But today we're talking about December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Let's go. Now, first, I think we have to understand the road to Pearl Harbor. We can't understand why the event matters if we don't understand the road to Pearl Harbor. Now, all of you, I know that you have your guided notes with you. So if you pull out your guided notes, you pick one up on the way in the door. I'm going to be following along with these guided notes as we go today. So I'll point out keywords on the slides. You just need to follow along with your eyes. This will help you take it from your brain. Your hand is going to write it down, and we're going to lock that in memory. So I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to say it to you, and you're going to use your hand to really lock it in your memory. Remember what kind of learning that is? Visual, auditory, and that's right, kinesthetic. So I want you to follow along with these guided notes. You also have a bit of a handout And you can follow along with this handout as we go as well. It's a bit of an infographic. So some of you who are visual learners might follow along on the infographic and really just tie this whole story together in your head as we go. So the road to Pearl Harbor, how did we get there in the first place? Well, first, the Japanese aim was to eliminate any potential conflict in Asia. It was about money, it was about territory, it was about oil. However, the Japanese government, they wanted to go about it the right way, if you could say that. They wanted to formally declare war on the United States of America so that when they attacked Pearl Harbor, it wouldn't have been an international crime. Well, the military didn't want that because it would blow the surprise, you could say. And actually, in the end, the military won out, and the war was not formally declared. And, of course, that's what led to the big secret attack. This man here, his name is Admiral Yamamoto. He was the architect of the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was the one who really advocated using aircraft instead of the traditional naval battle, instead of being ship versus ship. He wanted to come in from the sky, use dive bombing torpedoes, which of course is exactly what happened at Pearl Harbor. I want you to take a look in the lower right-hand part of your screen. What do you see right there? Anybody? Harvard. Yeah, that's right. He studied at Harvard. He actually spent a large portion of his career in Washington, D.C. as a Japanese military attaché to the United States. So just kind of take that for a second. It's really unique a lot of times how some of our enemies actually studied in America, like he studied at Harvard, or they served and worked inside the United States like he worked in Washington, D.C. Today's class, so that's the road to Pearl Harbor. Now you understand a little bit how we got there. Now I do need you to tie it together. When we talked about the road to war in Germany, we talked about the European countries and containment. They were the behaviors that they had called containment, where they were tolerating Hitler. We use the phrase, if you give a mouse a cookie, remember? So we have a full-fledged war going on in Europe at this time, but the United States had a foreign policy of what? It's an I word. Anybody? Anybody? I heard it in the back. Isolationism. That's right. The United States at this time was just trying to not be involved in this budding world war. We were isolated in our corner of the world. And we, however, what we're going to see is something that draws us into the war. That is this date, which will live in infamy. Today's class is going to be the top 10 big facts about Pearl Harbor. You know, it's real easy to go over sometimes the minutia. We're going to go over the big facts real quick. So ready, steady, let's go. 1, Pearl Harbor is located on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. This is Hawaii right here. Now, we know Hawaii to be the 50th state, but at the time it was just a territory. Let me really even bring you in on the geography here on my globe. We are located in the United States. We're actually in the state of Georgia. So spin the globe. Pew! Right smack in the middle of the Pacific Islands, that's where we have Hawaii. Oahu is actually where the city of Honolulu is. So that's the capital city of Hawaii. So even though it's not the big island, this is referred to as the big island, Oahu is the most significant island in terms of commerce and infrastructure and urban buildup. So this is where we're talking about. We got to understand the where before we can even start to understand the rest of the story. So Pearl Harbor, a Hawaiian island of Oahu. This is a pretty excellent map. It actually shows how far away Japan was. So here we have Japan in Asia, of course. Japan is an island nation. This is Hawaii. I mean, take yourself way off the screen to get to the coast of California. This shows how the Japanese sailed undetected to within 220 miles of Hawaii. This is where they launched their aircraft, and from the launch, then this is how they returned back to mainland of Japan. So really interesting to take a closer look at that. Kind of shows how the attack was possible, how close they were able to get to Hawaii. Number 2, Pearl Harbor was bombed on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Of course, that's a phrase that comes from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is, you guys know I'm a nerd for primary sources. This is an actual naval dispatch from that morning. It says air raid on Pearl Harbor, and this is a really iconic phrase. This is not a drill. That message would make it all the way to Washington, D.C. Here's another example. This is no drill. And the president himself would receive a dispatch much like this, where it said, this is no drill. And that just becomes a really iconic phrase. It's one thing for the Navy to be exercising in the South Pacific, but for this to be no drill, pretty significant. Also because of how unexpected it was. This is the actual, this is a blow up of the island of Oahu. And what this shows is count them with me, 1, 2, 2 waves of the attack. The first wave comes in at 7:55 a.m., comes from the north, and you can see it kind of button hooks around the west of the island. each of these aircraft, and if you read the map with me, we've done a lot of work about deciphering what's on an infographic. Read the infographic with me. You can see there's 4 different types of aircraft involved, from high-level bombers, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and then fighter jets. Those are the ones that were frequently called kamikaze. When they were out of ammunition, they'd crash into something to take out one more target, using themselves as the ammunition. So the first wave, 183 aircraft, 7:55 a.m., multiple targets. This is an Army airfield. This is an Army airfield, but this right here is Pearl Harbor. Now, the harbor itself is actually kind of inside of the island. It's a patch of water that is protected on all sides. So reasonably speaking, it was safe from a naval attack, which was the common thought at the time. Pearl Harbor is going to be attacked, force on force, ship versus ship. But remember, Admiral Yamato, he was an advocate for using air power, which is exactly what happened. There wasn't a second attack wave, and really, I just have to feel like about an hour into the attack, this whole thing happened in about an hour's time frame. This is probably what the island looked like. It was a buzz with aircraft, multiple targets, Pearl Harbor being the main and most famous name. But again, there were several targets all across the island that were also bombed and attacked on that day. So just a real chaotic hour to an hour and a half on this morning. Gotta love me some moving graphics. All right, moving right along. This is one of the type of aircraft that the Japanese actually used. And what made the attack possible was this torpedo right here. Now, these dive bombing torpedoes, they would actually go so far down under the water that for Pearl Harbor, which had a depth of about 40 feet, these torpedoes would not have been possible to use. However, is this ingenious invention, this piece of wood that got put on the tail fin, and you actually saw that in the video clip when I went through the whole video clip. This wooden piece modified the torpedo so that it wouldn't go so far down before it came back to the surface and ultimately sailed into its target. And so that actually shows a big part of the forethought that went into the planning of the attack. It wasn't a random attack. It didn't get developed overnight. It's very calculated, very well planned. This is one of those pieces of evidence. Number 3, this happened during World War II, and the United States declared war on the Japanese Empire because of World War II. So the very next day, the President of the United States declares war on Japan. I actually have a source here. I'm going to pass this around during our station time later. This is a replica. Okay, this is not original, but this is a replica newspaper that says, "War, Oahu bombed by Japanese planes." This is the Honolulu Star newspaper. So just pretty cool to think about what the newspaper that next day might have looked like. And this is something they sell in a replica souvenir shop. I'll talk a little bit more about when I personally got to go visit Pearl Harbor, try to bring that to life for you through some of my photos. Again, every newspaper across the country at that time reported this main event around the world. Here's something really interesting to take a look at. This is the Seattle newspaper, and it reports 104 die in the Hawaii raid. Well, we know over 2,000 people died, so this was very, very early reporting, and of course, greatly inaccurate at that time. But of course, newspaper people, wasn't social media, wasn't text message, wasn't internet around the world. It's probably the best reporting they had at the time. Moving right along. This is the president's address to Congress, where he says his famous phrase, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Our small group activity at the end of the class is going to replicate that. You are going to become the president. You're going to deliver his speech. So think about yourself behind that bank of microphones addressing the nation. A little bit more on that at the end of the hour. So even though, this is really important to understand, even though Hawaii was bombed by the Japanese, the U.S. was drawn into the war and actually with its allies agreed to a Europe first strategy. The idea was England, France, the Soviet Union, if we got to take out Hitler first. That's the Nazi symbol in the middle there. So Europe first, and then everybody would agree to go after the Japanese as well. It worked a little bit in theory, but the United States ends up fighting 2 wars at the same time, and we'll spend a whole nother day talking about the European dinner. Number 4, Japanese Empire used not only planes, but also submarines. This is an important piece of how the attack was structured. Now, everyone thinks about the airplanes, but they also used what were called midget submarines. That's a 2-person submarine. None of them were effective. Of the 10 people, the 10 Japanese sailors who were manning these submarines, only 1 survived. He actually ends up writing a book. This is him right there. He was actually considered he was not received back up home with honor because he became a prisoner of war. And it was kind of against the Japanese cultural values to be taken prisoner. In war, they valued it much more if you died fighting, which of course gets into the suicide bombing and the kamikaze pilot attitude. So this individual right here, even though he survived, he was actually received with a dishonor at home because of that. This is his actual submarine. This is a submarine that washed up on shore, and it is in a museum in Huntsville, Texas today. So you can kind of see, I wish there was a person in the photo, but if a person was standing next to it, I bet the person would be taller than the submarine. That's how cramped, how small these submarines were. Again, the submarine's largely ineffective in the overall attack. For the purpose of this video, I'm gonna move along much more rapidly because I'm approaching the end of 20 minutes. Again, I have a 90-minute class, and we really get into some discussion and small group activities. But main targets, Battleship Row, the USS West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Arizona, most iconically, most famously destroyed during the attack. A couple of great maps, and we spend some time diving into the actual tactics. This is Battleship Row. They are all parked right next to each other, made just a big, fat, juicy target for the airplane. So we talk about, was that a good idea or a bad idea? Why did it happen like that? USS Arizona was the worst hit, and it was sunk, and actually it remains at the bottom of Pearl Harbor today. I'm able to reference back to the movie because the students saw the full 8-minute clip, and we can talk about when the Arizona was hit. A couple of iconic photos, and we're always talking about primary sources and how they tell the story of people who were there on that day. USS Oklahoma was turned upside down. I'm actually from Oklahoma, so I give the kids a big connection to the USS Oklahoma and a couple of artifacts that are inside of Oklahoma City. You actually see I'm also wearing a shirt, a Hawaiian shirt that lists all of these ships on it. So I'm bringing the content to the classroom in every way possible. This is the Oklahoma upside down. It was righted. This is an awesome infographic. We spend a lot of time talking about it, how the Oklahoma was hit with 9 different torpedoes, and it was sunk in 9 minutes. So think about being asleep in your bunk on a Sunday morning, and 9 minutes later, your ship is turned upside down. Wow, that's crazy. The Oklahoma was righted in 1946. It was sold for scrap, but as it was en route to San Francisco, it was sunk in a storm, and it's at the bottom of this ocean to this day. USS West Virginia was torn open. This is an actual photograph taken by a Japanese aircraft. This is a torpedo strike on Battleship Row, and it's actually hitting the USS West Virginia. You can see 2 other aircraft in the frame as well. So a pretty amazing primary source there. I show this right now because we're talking about the West Virginia. This is the West Virginia below the waterline. So again, we just analyze these photographs, and the kids are pretty amazed at all that they're seeing on the screen. This is Dory Miller. He was a cook who manned the guns when needed. In the movie clip, I'm able to reference Cuba Gooding Jr. And what he does on screen, but we talk about the significance of Dory Miller as an African-American, receiving the 2nd highest award for valor in the Navy. And then unfortunately, he did die in the war in 1943. This is the USS West Virginia, again below the waterline. But guess what? It was present in the Bay of Tokyo upon the surrender of the Japanese in August of 1945. So it's kind of like a big take that. You sunk our ship at Pearl, but then the same ship was present at your surrender in 1945. Overall death toll, 2,350, 1,177 of them from the USS Arizona. Again, the ship that was sunk the fastest and had the most casualties. This is from the USS Arizona Memorial. These are the names of everybody who was killed on that ship. We take a moment to think about how this wall is full of names, and every name has a story. It's a husband, it's a brother, it's a son. There's women as well, so mothers and daughters, and we consider the cost of war. And then finally, it's really important to note that there was several other coordinated attacks happening on the same day. It wasn't just Pearl Harbor. It was also Midway Island, Wake Island, Guam, the Philippines, Malaya, and Thailand. So the Japanese were making a calculated effort to strike the entire South Pacific and try to gain control of key islands on the same day. Obviously, Pearl Harbor gets all the publicity, but I want my students to open their eyes and see the significance of the overall coordinated attack. Here is that infographic, students. So I'm just showing this on the screen in case you haven't taken a chance to look at it. Go ahead and you can look at that now. Kind of Pearl Harbor by the numbers. And then another one, it's on the back here. You got a front and a back. And this is just a really good infographic. I hope you'll take this home. I hope you'll share this with your families. I hope you have an opportunity to talk about what you've learned about Pearl Harbor around the dinner table tonight as well. All right, this is how we're going to round out our small group activity. I hope we'll really lock it in your brains while having fun as well. December 7th is considered National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. What I want us to do, and it's really cool when I teach this class on December 7th, if it's a first semester class, what we're going to do is we are going to recite President Roosevelt's date which will live in infamy speech. I try to bring the kids the time that I got to visit Pearl Harbor, and I'm showing them some personal pictures, but I don't have time to elaborate on that right now. So you're going to be the president. One at a time, you're going to come in front of the camera right here, and you're going to say one sentence from the speech. One sentence at a time as a whole class, all 28 of us, we're going to recite the whole speech. And what it's going to look like at the end of the class is this video that I have posted on YouTube from a previous class. And it's it's something really cool that I hope it locks it in your brain, what we discussed. This is my closure. And in the remaining time that we have in class, I have 4 stations set up. So we got corner A, B, C, and D. You guys know what it's like when we go to corners. When each corner, I have a different set of resources you can check out. So in one corner, I have these newspapers. You can go ahead and browse these newspapers from the war. In another corner, I have a model of the USS Arizona. I'm going to go ahead and put on my USS Arizona cap. So I got a model of the ship. This is the box. The model itself is set up in this corner over here. So you can check it out, see what the USS Arizona actually looked like. Think about if it's something you'd like to do with your life, serve on a Navy ship. In the other corner, I've got some resources that I actually got from Pearl Harbor when I visited. So you can look at some of the national parks, memorial items. And then in the third corner, I have some information about what is the cemetery on Pearl Harbor. It's called the Punch Bowl. So pick a corner, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and in these final 10 or 12 minutes, give you an opportunity to kind of thumb through some of these resources, check out the model, and just really immerse yourself in Pearl Harbor. So that's and of course, I'll float the room, answer some questions. I hope I've inspired some questions, and we can just have a lengthier conversation about what is Pearl Harbor, what is the date which will live in infamy. Thank you for your time and attention today. As always, yesterday's history, to which my students replied, tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. That's right. Go and wrap it. Go have a good one. Mr. Swanson, out.